Good afternoon, everybody. As Dr. said, I am Ms. Rachel Bloom, and the first question that was asked was how am I prepared to, or what do I aspire to be as a teacher? But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about myself. I am from Clearfield County, Clearfield, Pennsylvania. I went to Clearfield High School. I am an avid birder. I love wildlife. And I went to Penn State Du Bois, a branch campus, to get my associate in wildlife technology. I was a major band geek in school. I absolutely love band. I played the baritone or euphonium, whatever you want to call it. But it was just a good leadership experience for me, being in band, because I was the section leader for my baritone and trombone section. And then lastly, something that pertains to the major I am in. I was an FFA member of the Clearfield chapter with Ms. Jackie Carr. Being in band and being in the FFA has shaped me to where I am today. Ooh, that's backwards. All right, so who do I aspire to be as a teacher? So my teaching philosophy is that agriculture is for everyone. Whether you're a person that is a hairdresser or if you're actually delved into agriculture, it's for everyone, because everyone is touched by agriculture in one way or another. Whether you are a consumer of goods, where you go get produce, or just anything along those lines. And in Ag Ed, we heavily focus on the three-circle model, and I believe that that is a model that should be promoted through the program and touched on all of our students. There's classroom instruction, SAE, and FFA, which I will touch on throughout this presentation. All right, so you always expect students to mess up in classes, but that's okay. You just have to make sure that you have rules in place when they do. So first off, you're going to have a plan that all students are going to follow, which are the procedures. My procedures are, first, they're going to come in, they're going to take their seat. Pretty logical thing. Then they're going to do bell work. And that bell work is going to keep them kind of occupied before they go ahead and start talking or something to the person. It puts them in the place where they get the mindset that they're going to be learning. They're supposed to stay on task, which is huge. If they're not staying on task, you're not teaching them anything. And lastly, if they have a question, just ask. Like, I may not know it, but we can figure it out together. Then classroom expectations. So with agriculture, there's a lot of lab integration. So like you're in the shop a lot of the times, and I feel like that safety should not only be promoted in a shop setting, but also should be promoted in a classroom setting as well. Because you don't want students throwing pencils and like knocking each other's eyes out. So safety first is the first rule, first expectation that I have for my students. Then be prepared. That's an expectation that I have, and I'm going to hold them to it. However, if the student's having a bad day, you don't know what they go home to every night. If they come back and they don't have a pencil, let it go and give them the pencil. But if it happens over and over again, then that becomes a problem. Be respectful. That's kind of an umbrella rule, or expectation. I keep saying rule. Expectation. When you're respectful, it incorporates everybody. So if you're doing something that might not be okay to another person, like that's disrespectful. Like other people are trying to learn too. Like, come on. Show involvement. So yeah, I expect you to be involved in my class. I want you to learn. I'm here for you, and I want you to have a good time. I want you to learn from the things that I'm teaching you. And then be productive. Get stuff done. Like, you just gotta get it done. And then the one everybody dreads is the consequences. So first off, they would get a verbal warning. And hopefully with a verbal warning, they would retract their behavior, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. And then again, with the lab setting, if there's any safety hazard in lab, that's nothing to joke around with, because somebody could lose an eye, lose a finger, you gotta remove them from the lab. Then call home to parents. However, make sure that you call the parents ahead of time before you have to go to this and tell them something good about their student. Because that way they know that you're there for their student and they won't come back at you like, all you think is my kid's awful. No, you want to set up a good relationship with those parents. And then lastly, office referral. A lot of teachers just kind of shove this instantly because they don't want to deal with the behavior. But I think that if we work through these consequences and take it one step at a time and kind of feel out the situations, I really hope not to have to send students down to the office. That would be definitely the last resort. So as I said, my classroom management philosophy is only use the consequences when it's absolutely necessary. So try and correct the students with nonverbal cues. So proximity approach is a big one. If students are like on their phone or talking to one another, if you just calmly walk over as you're instructing, like they're gonna put the phone away or stop talking, but that's tricky because sometimes if you walk away, they're gonna be doing the same behavior, but you just then go to the verbal warning. So follow school protocol, that's huge. You want to protect yourself as an educator as well as helping the students. So, especially when you're first starting out teaching, you don't want to play with that all that much, but you got to follow school protocol. And also, look at good consequences and bad consequences. If a student does something amazing, you want to give them that push, saying, yeah, that's great, you did a nice drawing, good job, buddy. And then the bad consequences would be the classroom consequence list that I had mentioned earlier. So we are going out into the world to teach one day, and I was asked to think about my ideal program. And one thing that I love about Juniata Valley is all of their 8th graders have to go through the agriculture program for one 9-week marking period. And this exposes them to agriculture, and I think that is fantastic. I want to be the only teacher in the program because I want to teach it all. And so I want 8th graders to have to take my intro to ag class, get them excited for when they come up to high school to be an FFA, to do SAEs. Then I would want to have natural resources. As I said, I am a huge environmental person, so of course I'm going to want environmental sciences in my program. So what I was thinking is have it on a years 1 and 2, or 1 and 3, I would have the natural resource class on this side. These are the units here. And then years 2 and 4 would be the wildlife and fisheries, and you follow these units here. So that way students can take a class kind of similar twice and not get the same content. And then animal science, that's another big one that I absolutely love. Large animal science, I can remember when I was little, I would have literally a cow and horse encyclopedia, and I would just read that directly. Like that was my leisure reading in like younger middle school. And same with dogs and cats, so I would really want to teach animal science. And then plant and soil science. I like the thoughts of plants and soil science a lot. This is an area that I'm not completely strong in, but I do have like a little bit of background to it. But you learn best by teaching. So I would love to be able to teach this and get to know more about horticulture and soil sciences and be able to become strong in that area. It'd be cool to have a greenhouse. Then ag mechanics. So I, every once in a while I would do a little bit of woodworking with my dad. I remember I would make a little wood duck, and sometimes I would even whittle on the end of a stick. Like it was the fun times. But the more I got into it and coming into this program, I got exposed to it a lot more, and it's really cool. Like I want to teach this, like pulling stuff apart, putting stuff together. Like that's fun. and I want to be able to express that fun nature to my students. So AgMech 1 and AgMech 2, that's more of the basics class, and then I would want AgMech 2 to be more of like the independent study where they can make their own projects because they have that base knowledge in it. So speaking of ag mechanics, we were asked to do a $15 project, and this project was actually an idea given to me by Raylene. It is a Bolt tractor that lets you present a bunch of different welding skills, whether it's tacking on welds or running a bead in a small jointed area, brazing on the washers for the nails, that's what that is. So it's not the prettiest because I'm not an expert, but I did it. And it looked like a tractor, so I call it a win. Anybody want to pass this around and look at it?
Yeah, why not?
Make sure Dr. Ewing gets it.
Let's make sure that happens.
All right, so SAE integration into my program. SAE, for those of you who don't know, it stands for Supervised Agriculture Education. And that is one part of the three-circle model. And what it is, it's students get to go through different avenues of just trying to figure out who they want to be. And it's very career-driven. It gets them prepared for the workforce. So for SAE integration, I would want, all my students must complete a foundational SAE, meaning that they have to go through something and try to start figuring out who they want to be. So I put Rabbit ID up here because one of my cohort members, she's teaching at Cedar Crest, and she's talked about how they have 100% SAE cooperation, and it's because her cooperating teacher allows all of the students, beginning year students, to have a rabbit, and that is their SAE project. And I thought that was a really cool idea. If a program can afford to do something like that, like why not promote SAE? Like that's probably one of the weakest portions of the three-circle model, so it would be very beneficial to get them started out with something that you kind of, here you go, take this and start. And each student enrolled should have an SAE that aligns with their chosen career path. So FFA integration. So the cool thing about Pennsylvania is if you're in an agriculture class, you are in FFA. You don't have to pay dues. And just getting students wanting to do things, I would love to take my students and have them participate in CDEs and LDEs, which is career development events and leadership development events. And these are things that students will compete in, and they can excel and go to state, national levels. And I would proudly display that in a display case and have other students be like, yeah, that's pretty cool. They're doing some cool stuff there. I want my students to be proud to wear blue and gold. And as the ag teacher, of course I'm going to give them that little friendly push for participation in the FFA. So one way to get students to come to the FFA is to do it through recruitment videos. So Olivia Ayton and Victoria Herr and I worked together and we created this recruitment video. I'm going to show the first 30 seconds of it so you guys can get an idea of what it's like. into the mindset of students that aren't in FFA. Because, let's face it, every student has access to YouTube. Every student loves to watch videos. I know a few people that will watch videos for hours on end, just 2-minute little clips for hours. So. Okay. So, one really cool thing about about Ag Ed, which is my favorite part of agriculture education, is that it is very community-based. You are there for your community, and they are there for you. And we were asked to design a community-based instruction. And so when I'm out student teaching, I chose to utilize trout in the classroom because it is already there, and Raylene, usually she'll raise the trout, and then they'll get with a bunch of little elementary school students, and then they'll go down, have a little trout day, and then they'll push off the trout. And I was thinking, that's cool, but we could do something more. So I took a few days out of my animal identification unit and designated them to learning all about brook trout, which is the trout that she raises in her classroom. And the students will learn how or why we stock brook trout, the importance of brook trout, and how anglers play a role in management with fishing license and outdoor recreation, and they will then take that knowledge and give it back to the community. So before they release their trout into the waterways, they're gonna hold events and allow people from the public to come in and join them in the fish release, and they will educate the public, not me, students will educate the public on these amazing fish. So the next question is, what experiential education opportunities have I engaged in to become a better agricultural educator? So here at Penn State, I've taken many classes, but there are some that you hone in on. And ANSI 201, that class kicked my butt. However, it did give me a lot of information on animal science that I had never known before, and it was super beneficial. And then I said how much I liked ag mechanics, and the more I was able to get a feel for it when I was here. So AE 349, kind of learning how to do the things, and then 350, learning how to teach the things. So that class really did a good for me. And then AE 311. So when I was in FFA, my FFA chapter didn't really do SAEs. I actually had never even heard of SAE before 311. And it was mind-blowing to all the possibilities that was out there for Ag Ed other than just classroom instruction. Like, I didn't know about CDEs, I didn't know about LDEs, I didn't know about SAEs, all of these crazy acronyms. And it was so cool to see all of the things I could potentially do as an agriculture educator. Like, how cool is that? You can take kids places and do things with them. So, certifications. I am certified in CPR and first aid. I cannot remember the acronym for that one, but it is safe tractor driving. I am a certified Google educator. And lastly, thanks to Dr. Foster's Parley Pro class, I am now an accredited parliamentarian. So, there you go. And as I said, I have my associate's degree in wildlife technology. I learned so much in those classes, and I loved being in wildlife. I went into wildlife wanting to be a game commission officer, wanting to be a park ranger, but there was just one class that changed my mind, and I think it was Ag 160 over at Penn State Du Bois, and it was connections between wildlife and agriculture. And I remember my ag teacher telling me that I was going to be an ag teacher someday. didn't believe her. But after my wonderful experiences there and in that one class, here I am standing in front of you today. So internships and employments, I had an awesome opportunity to intern up at the Elk Country Benezet Center. I think I said that right. But it was awesome being able to talk to the public, and I was able to educate them on different things. They let me make my own presentation about bats, and I got to talk all about bats, and it was awesome. And then employment, for pretty much the entire time I've been here at Penn State, University Park, I've worked at the Penn State bookstore. And let me tell you, they're just like another family to me. Like, yeah, I have a bunch of little families here and there, but who would have thought people at my minimum wage job could be an amazing family and support system for me. I cannot thank them enough for all the support they've given me. So for professional development, I attended the PAAE conference in the summer. And then I got an awesome opportunity to go to NAAE in San Antonio, Texas, just a couple weeks ago. I participated in GLAG 18, and I went on a domestic study away trip to the New England states, which was an amazing opportunity for me in particular, because I've always wanted to live up in the New England states, and I absolutely fell in love with New Hampshire. Like, it's so forested, and just ag is based on your community, and they got environmental science. Like, I loved it. Then there was PSU Ag Ed 19. I couldn't thank these guys enough. We went to FLC, got together for Teach Ag Twitter chats, and then I also have to mention my virtual mentors. Matt Eddy, Janae Michael, and Sharisa Naylor, thank you so much for being there for me throughout this semester. Then, how am I prepared to maximize my student teaching opportunity? So, this is the wonderful Ms. Raylene Russell. I have gained such a great bond with her, at least in my opinion. She's an awesome person, and I will be teaching for 15 weeks, and her class periods are 45 minutes long. So the program strengths of Juniata Valley is, well, I'm going to say the top one last because it's my favorite. Academic rigor. They're very good at getting grades up high and NOCTI's passed. NOCTI is the agriculture, I guess, standardized test that you take. It depends on if a student takes so many ag classes, and then you can take the NOCTI and it'll help the school out. And then they have decent facilities for the size and the budget of the school. They have a shop, they have the classroom, and then they have a chicken coop with a bunch of little chickens running around. They get out sometimes. And then community involvement. There was one thing that stuck with me whenever I first visited Raylene is I asked her about the community because I love the feel of family. And they have an awesome basketball team there for women, or girls, I guess. And she said that there was a sign in somebody's yard as they were going to support these girls in basketball. And the sign said, "Last one out, turn the light off." So it was like the whole town was going to watch these girls play basketball. And as soon as she told me that story, boom, I wanted to be at Juniata Valley. So in your handout, it's kind of hard to see up here, but it's a master calendar of every day that I'm going to be teaching and when I'm going to be teaching certain units. And then here's my unit map. This is when I'm going to be teaching the units, what I'm going to be observing. I have 2 classes that I'm going to be teaching all the way through, and that is my natural resource class and my Intro to Ag Basics. The cool thing about my Intro to Ag Basics class is I have 2 units in it. FFA and SAE is the first unit, and the second unit is Intro to Ag Basics. But then I'm still there whenever their last 9 weeks starts. So Raylene told me that whatever unit I liked best, I can revamp it and I can teach it again for the beginning of that part of the semester, of that 9-week period. So for my instructional organization, I have all of my unit plans and my lesson plans in wonderful binders. I had to fight with a punch hole to get that, but it happened. So, my individual strengths. I know when to put my foot down. I know a lot of people have an issue, or not really an issue, but they have difficulties knowing when to say no, knowing when to say stop. But I'm also very understanding. So, you mess with me, I'm going to tell you, you need to stop, because that's not the correct behavior. But I will try to understand where they're coming from, and we'll work it out. We'll hug it out again. Well, maybe not, but I'm a pretty good listener. A lot of people know I don't talk all that much. This is probably the most I've talked in my life. And I'm a very calm person. One time we were working with oxyacetylene, and the acetylene was going up, and I was with one of my cohort members, Lisa Bolts, and she was freaking out and yelling at me, trying to get Dr. Ewing, and I'm just standing there like, we should probably do something about this. And I'm a fast thinker when it comes to making split decisions. Like, I know when something's going the wrong way, and we need to take it back. My weaknesses, I'm a procrastinator. I wait way too long to do things, and it shows sometimes. And I'm enthusiastic. I am. I really am. I try my best to show it. But whenever I get reviews from my labs that I've done, I always get, you need to be more enthusiastic. You need to be more enthusiastic. What am I doing wrong, guys? Like, I'm trying to be more enthusiastic, and I can't. And so my goals, I want to leave an impression on the students that I student teach. I want to be that person, even for the 8th graders, that they're like, wow, we miss Miss Bloom. We wish she'd come back. But I'm only there for a little while, but I want to leave that impression on you. And I want to gain confidence. I don't know if you could tell, but at the beginning of this presentation, I'm a little nervous. And I'm still a little antsy, working back and forth, but as I work through it, I gain the confidence that I need, and I'll be able to present and teach students, because I want to have fun. I want to teach. And I think having fun and knowing when to limit it is a good thing. And you remember things that are impactful to you and through conversations. I want to grow in my content knowledge for things. And then I want to become a part of the community. I want to go to those basketball games. I want to go to those track meets. I want to be there for my students outside of the realm of ag. And so, through all this, I care. I care a lot about people, about the environment, about agriculture. I care. And this is the saying that I live by. I think it applies to every aspect of my life. And it's by the great Dr. Seuss's Lorax. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful a lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Any questions?
Round of applause for Rachel. Rachel, I would agree that perhaps in the last 30 or so minutes you did talk more than you did for the past 15 weeks in my courses. And yes, when you are confident, you can show that enthusiasm. And you are confident that you're in the right spot doing the right thing and it comes through. So that would be true when you teach as well. When you're confident in your material, you're going to be able to show that enthusiasm easier. But it's very obvious that you have it. So we're excited to go to our questions. Approximately 15 minutes. We'll ask questions and rotate between the live audience, our virtual audience, and our teacher education panel. So we always start with those in the room. Does any of my live audience participants, attendees have a question for anything that Rachel shared or about what she might get to do? Oh, back here. How about Miss Curry?
Well, Rachel, thank you for sharing that presentation with us. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better. One question that I have is you mentioned that relationships are important, and I would agree. And you also said that what excites you most is that you will have the 8th graders for a semester or for a 9-week period, correct?
Yes.
So, my question to you is, how are you going to get them excited and hook them in Ag Ed or FFA? How are you gonna hook them for your program?
See, it's probably gonna be a little rocky at first because I am a very nervous person when things start out. But I think through my lessons and hooking them in, because we have awesome things in Ag Ed, like animals that people can draw into. And you just need to find the balance to make it relatable to the students, and that'll draw them in, and it'll get them excited to do things. Like, who doesn't want to go play with a chicken?
All right?
How about to our virtual audience, Miss Moore?
Your bookstore family is watching, and Sarah Lang says she's happy to send you plans for the rabbits, because she liked that you incorporated that. And you have a question from Allison Balmer, and she says, Rachel, I can tell that diversity and inclusivity are very important to you. Both are incredibly important for the current and future success of agriculture programs. How specifically do you plan to address these two key components in your student teaching internship and future programs?
So the inclusivity and what?
Diversity and inclusivity.
So, going back to NAAE, I took a workshop ran by Dr. Foster, and it was an empathy workshop. And I just want to be able to kind of express empathy to my students and have that be impressioned on them, so that way they can give empathy to their classmates. Because there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. And I want my room to be a safe place for everybody.
Thank you, Rachel. Teacher education panel, Dr. Curry.
Rachel, I love your wildlife background and how you're bringing in that different flair in Ag Ed. One of the things that I loathe when I walk into a program is whenever I see snippets and attitudes on this silo mentality of, well, we're the ag program and we live over there in that weird part of the school and we're our own people, we do our own thing. Tell me how you're going to sort of break down some of that silo mentality and how you're going to reach out to not only academic units in your school, but partners in your school and communities. How are you going to break down that sort of, well, we're the ag program and we do our own thing type mentality?
I mean, just get the students involved in things. Like, have them do, encourage them to do events, because FFA isn't about the teacher planning things. It's about the students planning things. And if you can get them to want to do, I don't know, tractor driving to school, that's one thing that my cooperating center does. That gets the elementary kids out. That gets everybody out, because you're driving tractors to school? What the heck are you doing? And then they come in, and that brings them in, and then it opens up conversations that you wouldn't have had through activities that your students put together and are able to relay to people that aren't in our little corner of the school.
So with more specificity, particularly as it relates to environmental education and wildlife, what kinds of people, what kinds of teachers can you work with in your building beyond your four walls of your ag classroom to make sure it's understood that your ag classroom is going to the greater good of that school? That you're not just teaching kids about ag, but that you're helping them along and become better citizens, and the principals recognize the value of your classroom.
Well, whenever we did the biotech lab and went up, and you said that you can utilize not only the other facilities, but you can utilize the other teachers too. And you teach agriculture sciences, but there are other science teachers, there's other biology teachers, and maybe you can swap classes, or you can have classes half the class comes with me, half the class goes with you, kind of thing, and just get them all integrated together. Because especially with the sciences, if you figure out ag science is cool as a science teacher, you get pretty tight guesses.
Thank you. Those in the audience, as I try to give fair opportunity. Ms. Matthey?
This kind of goes along with Dr. Curry's question. But first, it's really exciting to see you come out of your shell a little bit, see you in your element, and the passion that you have for natural resources. how are you gonna, sometimes, a lot of times, folks that are heavy in agriculture don't necessarily connect well with natural resources. You have that, that little divide there, and folks in agriculture almost see the natural resources as kind of like the enemy. How are you going to encourage students to connect and see the value that you see in natural resources?
Well, the way I see natural resources, it's all a balance. Like, you want to manage for agriculture, but you also want to manage for your resources. And so one thing that was talked about a lot when I was taking wildlife courses is if you introduce a new species, like, it could go and it could do something completely different than what you want it to do, and it could like damage crops and do this and that. But if you have the students see that, I think you see that there's the natural resource people aren't out to get, and the natural resource people need to see that the production agriculture are not out to get them. Like, it's just button heads all the time, and you need to be able to cross that bridge to see that there's a balance between the two.
Rachel, I'm going to jump the virtual questions, but as we talk in Ag Ed about that model, we often talk about the sweet spot of the learning activity that integrates and connects from our leadership laboratory to our work-based learning and applied individual differentiation through SAE and dynamic classroom instruction. I'd like you to give one example of a learning activity that transcends all three of those components, that connects all three of the pieces of the Ag Ed model.
One learning activity.
Mm-hmm. Or content, concept. I'd love for you to do it for environmental sciences, but you don't have to. How about I do this? While you're thinking on it, you are going to have to do it for something related to environmental sciences, natural resources. But I'm going to let Dr. Curry share an example from animal sciences, because that's his passion area. Each of us has our passion area of content.
So through a variety of career development events in the animal science realm, I might isolate some very specific objectives that they have to meet to do well in that CDE. I would highlight that in my classroom through some focused instruction on those specific objectives. In the meat science realm, for example, they may have to identify or judge quality grades on a beef carcass. We may bring those tenets of quality grades into the classroom, and then we may actually have a student who might be working at a local butcher shop, and he actually donates his time to learn about how to cook or quarter a beef carcass. So that might be where all three of those might come together.
Would environthon be a good answer for that?
Rachel, I'm waiting to hear your answer, and I'm sure it's going to be good. And so Dr. Curry gave you a great example, and I'm looking for you to connect for me across all three models a piece of content that you would teach around environmental sciences, natural resources / wildlife that would connect your classroom to your FFA to your SAE.
So I'm going to go with environthon. It is a really good way for students to be exposed to different careers, because whenever you go to the environthon events, there's the PA Fish and Boat Commission, there's game commission officers there that kind of help run the program, there's foresters, so that kind of pulls in like the workforce community base. So teaching content for environthon, like what I want to do in my natural resources class is every day I'm going to have a different bird call, and they got to figure out what the bird is. Just pulling that in to be able to compete with the competitive nature and being able to see those professionals out in the field.
So you're doing great. You're missing one piece. Connect it. You can do it. Because we're right there. You just got to carry it all the way through.
What was the piece I'm missing?
Well, it's that piece that you said you weren't familiar with in high school.
The FFA.
No.
SAE.
Yep.
SAE. It can.
So how could they, if you're teaching them bird calls in the class, and then you're going to let them apply it in a competitive event, whether it's the Environmental Natural Resources CDE or the Envirothon, how could it connect, or where could it connect through SAE?
So they could do a research project with bird counts while they walk through the woods. They can, so when you take bird counts, you listen for the distance and the amount of birds that are in your area, because a lot of times you can't see the birds. So they could do a research project of what birds are in their area during given times of the year.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Are there any other questions from our audience? From our own line? Then it's time for the 90-second question. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay. The 90-second question is where you get to finish strong with us. In 90 seconds, I set your context for you. You have traveled, you're at the school, you've spent probably about 5 hours at the school. They've reviewed your portfolio and materials. You've interacted with the students. You taught a lesson, in fact, they observed it. You had a meeting with the advisory board, met principals and other teachers. It's at the end of the day, and you're sitting there across from the superintendent. And the superintendent says, Rachel, your materials look really good, but I need you to tell me really clearly, in 90 seconds, why should we hire you?
You should hire me because I am here for the students. The students are my number one priority. How does that saying go? They're going to remember the things that you do, not what you taught them. And I want to be there for them. And yeah, I want to share my passion in agriculture with them. But there's going to be times when they fail. There's going to be times when I fail. But we're all in this together. And I think that I could make an awesome educator being there for the students and involving our community.
I would be excited to hire you. Round